All right. So, what are some environmental issues that face humanity, and what are their impacts? And we spoke about some responses to the do now. So here we go. All right. I'll give you a second here. All right. Global warming, I'm sure, is not something that is new to you guys. This has been a topic of discussion for quite some time now. So, in general, this is going to get a little sciencey. So let's try to follow along here. Um, when I was a kid, I always used to be amazed by the fact that in the summer, like July and August, for example, you'd go out to the car and open the car door to get in. And for some unexplainable reason, it's 30 degrees hotter in the car than it is outside. And that used to just drive me crazy trying to figure out why that was the case. And the answer to that is greenhouse effect. So when we feel heat on planet Earth, okay, we're not feeling the sunlight. That's not what's heating us. That's not the way heat works. What happens is light heats up the Earth, and then the Earth radiates that heat back out. And when the Earth radiates that heat back out, that's what we feel as heat on Earth. Okay, so that's the first thing that we need to understand. Now, there's something exists called greenhouse gases, okay, CO2 being one of them. CO2 and other greenhouse gases formed this seal around the world, and basically what happens is the light can pass through these greenhouse gases and heat up the Earth, but when the Earth radiates that heat back out, those greenhouse gases prevent that heat from escaping the atmosphere. So what happens is we're bringing in this light, the Earth is changing the light into heat, and then the greenhouse gases are trapping the heat around the surface of the Earth. This is essentially the description of global warming. This is what's happening, okay? And it is the presence of those greenhouse gases that are most responsible for it. Now, we will go through things that point out that this is the doing of mankind. Industry in particular, and the burning of fossil fuels has pumped so many greenhouse gases into the atmosphere that we are kind of continuing to reinforce this effect. And it's getting worse and worse and worse over time. And the result is rising temperatures on Earth on the average. Ice caps are melting, which is causing sea levels to rise. And there's various other kind of profound impacts that are felt also. If you're really that interested in this, Al Gore did his famous documentary called An Inconvenient Truth, which kind of goes over all of this stuff kind of pretty comprehensively. So if this is something that you are interested in, you can take a closer look there. But that summertime car, when I was a kid, what was happening was the light was passing through the windows of the car and heating up the interior, but the closed windows and the closed interior of the car was preventing that heat from escaping the car. So by the time you're done, the car inside is hotter than the air outside. And the same effect is what's happening to the Earth. So I think that the scariest component of this is probably rise in sea level. As you know, as the ice caps kind of melt, we've seen kind of what's happening. We've already seen what the dangers are of certain areas being at or below sea level, most namely New Orleans. If you look at the map on the top left, that's the southern part of Louisiana. That's where New Orleans is located. So a 20-foot rise in sea level would be catastrophic. Okay. Miami's underwater, 100 miles of South Florida. Half of the Netherlands, half of New Orleans, a lot of those port cities on the Gulf, all that stuff is underwater. All right, I'll give you a second. Well, as far as vocab goes, deforestation is about as easy as it gets, I guess. We're kind of unforesting the world, if you will. So this is cutting down or removing trees in wooded areas and so on and so forth. Now, in my opinion, of these issues that we study, deforestation, desertification, global warming, deforestation is the one that sticks out to me, and I'll explain to you why. It's hard to imagine benefits of global warming or benefits of desertification. They are kind of universally just bad things. Deforestation is a different story. You could argue that there are benefits to deforestation. As the populations of places continue to grow, we need more space to live. The forests also provide all kinds of interesting resources to us, be it from timber and building materials to all of the fancy things we find deep inside some of these most remote places like the Amazon, where we find the cures to disease, where we find all kinds of, new species and things like that. So there, as far as deforestation goes, there are some benefits to it. Now, I think, it'll be pretty easy to argue that the kind of detriment and the costs certainly outweigh the benefits, what with modern technology being what it is. But this is an argument that can be made. And for the sake of making it, we will at least present it. So deforestation kind of does stick out with regard to some of the other things. If you think about if the world's covered in forest, where are you going to plant crops? So, you know what I mean? Or, just other basic kind of fundamental questions like that. Deforestation can be an answer to some of those problems sometimes. Now, obviously, it's going to come with tremendous cost, and we will go over that more as we move forward, but it's something to think about at least. All right, I'll give you a second. Last slide. So the last of the big three is this desertification. Okay, and we've kind of briefly mentioned this already when we did the genocide unit, when we talked about genocide in Darfur, Sudan. Okay, and we said that part of the reason is that the Sahara Desert is growing, and as the desert grows, the fertile land decreases. So you have two groups of people fighting over a diminishing amount of fertile land in a particular place. So we've already seen the kind of socio-political impacts of desertification and what they mean in real terms for groups of people in certain places. Okay. So desertification is the process by which fertile land becomes a desert, usually due to drought, deforestation, or inappropriate agriculture. So my first question is always, how does deforestation, the chopping down of trees, cause desertification? And some very sciencey people can explain this a lot better than I can, but essentially, trees and forests are essential to keeping a balanced ecosystem, and without trees, it can lead to desertification, and that's part of the story also. The other part of it is land degradation or inappropriate agriculture. Land degradation is kind of a synonym. We tend to use them interchangeably, but the idea is that after a certain time, fertile land can become not fertile anymore. Okay, and we've seen this most notably in the Roman Empire. This was a major problem in Rome. They were not great at understanding how agriculture impacted land over time. And it was the mistakes made during times like the Roman Empire and other times that taught us about like the three-field crop rotation system and other various strategies where we learned that we need to kind of reinvigorate the soil after a certain amount of time. You can't just continually plant crops in the same place over and over and over again and expect that to work. Eventually, what will happen is you will pull all of the nutrients out of that soil, and then after a while, that soil will become barren and unable to produce crops because of a lack of nutrients. And that's part of land degradation also. So The most obvious kind of impact of desertification is that you can't grow crops in a desert. And we don't need rocket science to kind of point that out to us. But it is some of the other secondary impacts of that. Well, what conditions does that cause? And we saw that in Darfur and Sudan.